The sun was setting over San Francisco, casting long orange streaks across the bay as the rooftop restaurant Elara began to fill with its usual evening glow. It was the kind of place where the menu had no dollar signs. The wine list was thicker than most novels, and everyone spoke just a bit softer, like the price of their meal gave them permission to whisper. Lunel moved through the space like a breeze, visible when she needed to be, undeniable when she spoke. Her uniform was crisp, hair tucked into a clean, elegant roll. But it wasn't her posture or her precision that caught people off guard, it was her presence. Calm, poised, like she was always aware of more than she let on. She took pride in being unshakable. Lunel had worked here for nearly a year, long enough to learn the regulars, to memorize wine pairings, and to understand that no one really looked at the servers. Not really. They smiled, they nodded, they expected, and Lunel delivered. But tonight, something was different. She could feel it before she saw it. He walked in with a swagger that didn't quite match the subtle elegance of the place. Too loud, too assured. Gray suit, steel watch, a phone still glowing in his palm as he took a seat at table 12 near the edge of the glass balcony, alone, but clearly comfortable with attention. His name was Joran Vale. Lunel didn't know him yet, but she recognized the type. High-earning, high-talking. The kind of man who thought silence was weakness. And eye contact was a dare. She approached, with her usual warmth. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Elara. May I bring you a drink while you look over the menu?" Joran glanced up, just a flick of the eyes, and then back to his phone. Sure, Malbec. Something Argentinian and expensive. "Surprise me." She gave a small nod, already turning.
Of course.
As she walked back to the sommelier, she could feel his gaze follow her. Appreciative. Appraising Dot, she returned with the wine, poured with smooth precision, then handed him a leather-bound menu. That's when he really looked at her. "You've got that look," he said suddenly, almost smirking. "You ever get that? The one that says you're not just a waitress?" Her tone didn't change. "I believe every role has its worth, sir." Joran chuckled, leaning back. "Nice line, but come on. What's your story? Secret poet, actress, law school dropout?" She didn't answer right away, only adjusted the placement of his water glass. "Let me guess," he continued. "Linguistics. Major, quiet girl in the back of the class. Big brain, no breaks. You learned languages to escape reality, didn't you?" Now her eyes flicked to his, steady, unamused. "Do you often play guessing games with your servers?" He grinned. "Only the interesting ones. It wasn't flirtation, not really. It was performance his. Like he needed her to know he could. Read her, like guessing her life made him clever. I studied people," he went on. "It's part of the job. Spot talent where others don't." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that what this is? It's a job interview?" "Maybe," he said. "Depends on how good the steak is, and the company." Lunel took one slow breath, not out of frustration, but calculation. She'd dealt with men like him in lecture halls, on trains, In donor meetings at her old university job. They didn't yell. They didn't threaten. Assumed you'd be flattered. Assumed you'd want to prove them. Assumed they still had the upper hand. She smiled softly. I'll give the chef your compliments in advance. As she turned, he called out again, Hey, you are good with words, aren't you? She paused. He continued, Tell me something ... in French. No, wait. Impress me. Say something in Mandarin. Several heads turned. A nearby couple glanced over. Lunel didn't move. She only said, Do you want me to show off or serve you dinner? Joren lifted his glass, amused. Why not both? She looked at him for one long, unreadable second. Then she walked away. But in that moment, Joren Vale had no idea the quiet woman he'd just tried to turn into. Entertainment was holding back more than her resume. She was holding back thunder. And when she chose to speak again, it wouldn't be for his amusement, it would be for the truth. The night pressed on. Velvet and electric, with the city lights flickering like quiet applause below the rooftop's glass railing. Ilara had taken on its usual rhythm-polished silverware clinking, wine swirling, soft jazz floating in the air like steam. Joren Vale had already charmed the hostess, made the bartender roll his eyes twice, and now he leaned back in his seat like a king waiting for the next court jester to amuse him. Except the only person left to impress was Lunaland. She wasn't playing. She returned to his table, carrying a platter of seared duck breast and truffle. Cauliflower puree, the scent hit like luxury. She placed it down with care, eyes on the plate. Hands steady. He was watching her again, not admiring assessing. So he said, swirling the Malbec, What's your actual story? You look like you're hiding a resume behind that apron. Lunel tilted her head slightly. And if I am, he leaned forward. Then I'd say it's wasted. You've got presence, poise. You shouldn't be waiting tables. You should. Be what? She interrupted smoothly. Sitting across from someone like you. The corners of his mouth curled. Exactly. She didn't smile. Just stood there, the flicker of candlelight caught in her eyes like something sharp. I don't mean offense, he added. I admire potential. That's what I do. I spot it, shape it, maybe even save it, she repeated, as if tasting the word. He nodded. You'd be amazed how far the right connections can take someone. There it was, again, that glint of generosity soaked in ego, that practiced tone of men who believe their attention is a gift. Then, without warning, he switched languages. A quick line in Italian, slightly exaggerated, meant to impress. Lunel didn't flinch. She nodded. Your accent's Milanese, but your grammar's Roman. That caught him off guard. Before he could reply, she continued. In flawless Italian, il potere, non dato, riconosciuto. Power isn't given, it's recognized. Blinked. That's good, he said, after a pause. Did you Google that backstage? She ignored the jab. Instead, her voice dropped quieter. Mama. Deeper like velvet tightening dot. Then came Mandarin. Smooth, measured, unbroken. She said it slowly, watching his face shift from amusement to confusion. 你以为我只是一个服务员吗? You think I'm just a waitress? The nearby tables went still. Someone at table 10 nearly dropped a fork. Joran's wine glass stopped mid-air. Lunel leaned closer, just enough for only him to hear the next part, still in Mandarin. 如果你不尊重我，就连你的话也没有价值. If you don't respect me, even your words have no value. Now his grin was gone. The air had changed, so subtle most wouldn't feel it. But he did. The warmth had vanished. The game was over. He cleared his throat. You're full of surprises. Perform, she said simply. And only one of those involves dignity. He studied her, now really studied her, as if he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Okay? The sharp lines of her cheekbones, the smooth posture, the certainty in her voice. This wasn't just a clever woman. She was dangerous in the most elegant way, and he'd walked into his own undoing. I wasn't trying to offend you, he said finally. Yes, she said. You were. Silence. Then she added, you just didn't think I'd understand. Enough to notice. A long pause followed. It stretched between them like a tightrope. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, but it was different this time. Softer, smaller, humbled. Tell me something. He said, how does someone like you end up here? She crossed her arms. What does that mean, someone like me? He opened his hands like surrender. Someone clearly, brilliant. Lunel breathed in, slow and deep. And then for the first time that night she offered him something true. I used to lecture on language, dynamics, and post-colonial linguistics, she said. Taught for 4 years abroad. Then my father had a stroke, so I came back. Joran's eyes widened slightly. Academia pays in prestige, she continued, not in medical bills. He nodded slowly. That's rough. It's life, she said. And life doesn't care about your titles, or your suits, or your potential. He looked down at his plate. I didn't mean to diminish you, but you did, she said. Because people like you think intellect wears a suit and speaks from a podium. You forget that grace doesn't always come with credentials. Joran met her eyes again. You're not like most people I meet. No, she said. I'm not the story you came in expecting. I'm the footnote you'll never forget. And with that, she stepped back, offered a quiet, enjoy your meal, and disappeared into the candlelight like mist leaving him with the taste of duck. Shame, and something he couldn't name sitting heavy in his throat. Asterisk, the night outside deepened into a hazy indigo, the kind of color that made everything inside the restaurant feel sharper by contrast, brighter glasses, louder forks, warmer candlelight. But at table 12, the mood had taken a quieter turn. Joran Vale sat with his hand resting near his untouched wine glass, shoulders just slightly slouched, not from fatigue, but from something else. Impact. He wasn't used to silence that pressed back. He had come to Alara expecting to be entertained, flattered, maybe even obeyed. But instead, he had been seen and, worse, measured. Across the room, Lunel stood at the PA's terminal, entering orders with smooth, mechanical ease. But there was nothing automatic about her mind. Her breath was steady, her expression unreadable, but her thoughts pulsed hot beneath the surface. She didn't regret speaking up. What she regretted, if anything, was how familiar it all felt. The arc of it. A man assuming, a man poking, a man rattled when the truth didn't match his assumptions. She'd lived it in classrooms, in offices, on the subway, in grocery aisles. But this one was different, not because he said worse things, but because for a split second she thought he might have been different. That illusion had shattered. And strangely, so had his armor, when she returned to his table to clear his appetizer plate. He looked up not with bravado, but with something quieter, curiosity, or maybe even respect. "You're Italian," he said. It wasn't just fluent. It was ... lived in. She met his gaze, because I lived there. Rome, Venice, then Florence. I interned with a language preservation foundation. Joran nodded slowly. And Mandarin. Beijing. Thesis work. He leaned back. Arms crossed now. You know, when I asked you to impress me, ... I wasn't ready for what that would feel like. Lunel gave a soft smile, thin and tired. You wanted a magic trick. You didn't expect to be the rabbit in the hat, he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. No, I really didn't. Something shifted then. Not dramatic, not forced, just subtle. The table between them didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. More like a confession booth. A strange intimacy had taken root, born not of attraction, but of exposure. He had revealed his arrogance, and she had met it with truth that had a way of disarming a man. Can I ask something personal? He said. Eyes searching. You can. Ask, she replied. Whether I answer depends. He hesitated, then said, Do you ever ... miss that world? Academia, policy, language labs. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table, slow, every day. But my father can't speak anymore. He knows my name on good days. And he laughs at old jazz records. So, I stay. He exhaled, the air between them now heavy with something more human than ego. I haven't cared for anyone in years, he said quietly. Not really. Not the way you just described. She looked at him, not surprised, just clear. Because most people don't slow down until life forces them to. Their eyes lingered. Long, quiet moment. The room around them continued to hum with luxury, but their corner had gone almost still. He leaned in just slightly. Is that why you didn't flinch earlier, when I mocked me? She finished. Yes. Lunel nodded once. Because? I've heard worse, and because I'm not here to flinch, I'm here to endure. That's the part no one sees. Joran's voice softened. You carry yourself like someone who doesn't owe the world anything. She smiled faintly. Because I don't, and I certainly don't owe it explanations. He studied her for a long time. You're unlike anyone I've met in years. That's because you haven't been looking in the right places. Her words weren't flirtation. They were fact. And yet, there was a thread of something warmer. In the air now. Not romantic, not yet, but charged like a current that might shift if either one stepped closer. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly unsure of himself. Do you think ... people like me ever really change? She tilted her head. If they're willing to be uncomfortable long enough, maybe. And for the first time since he'd walked in, Joran didn't speak. He just sat back and let the silence wrap around him, not as punishment, but as invitation. Lunel gathered his plate, gave a quiet nod, and turned to walk away. But this time, she didn't feel his eyes on her like before, not as a man measuring, but as one reflecting. Whatever had cracked in him earlier was still unraveling. Asterisk, the final hour at Alara always had a distinct rhythm. Tables thinned. Lights dimmed just a notch more, and the soft jazz gave way to something slower, more intimate. The city below sparkled like a reflection of all the conversations held here, most forgotten before dessert. But not tonight. Joren. Vale sat alone now, swirling the last of his Malbec, staring into the dark red pool like it held an answer. His plate had been cleared, his arrogance peeled away. All that remained was a quiet man, newly aware of the room around him and himself inside it. He watched as Lunel passed by again, her apron slightly wrinkled, sleeves rolled once at the forearm. She didn't glow. She didn't glide. She moved. Like someone who had nothing to prove but everything under control. That, he realized, was what made her unforgettable. She wasn't trying to impress. She just was. When she returned with the check holder, she placed it gently in front of him. "Whenever you're ready," she said. Voice calm, detached. He didn't. "Open it." "Not yet." "Okay." His hand hovered over the leather, fingers resting on the edge. "Wait," he said. She didn't sigh. Didn't smile either. Stood there. He looked up, then down again, fumbling slightly. "I owe you more than a tip." "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "No," he insisted. "I do. Not just for the food. For calling me out. You could have walked away, ignored me, smiled politely. But you didn't. You held up a mirror and made me look. No one does that." Lunel's eyes narrowed slightly, more skeptical than flattered. "Most people don't like what they see in the mirror." "I didn't," he admitted. "But that's the point, isn't it?" Opened the billfold and slid in a card, his company card, but also something else. A sleek, embossed business card with his name, title, and direct number. He looked up. "I meant what I said earlier. I run an international consulting firm. We hire cultural advisors, translators, policy liaisons, people who understand nuance. and power. People like you. She didn't touch the card. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an invitation, he said, to step into a room that actually deserves you. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not pride, not excitement. Something harder to read. She finally picked up the card, turned it over in her fingers. And you think tonight qualifies as a successful recruitment dinner? He chuckled. Softly, I think tonight was the first time in years I didn't talk my way into something. I listened, and maybe I want more of that in my circle. Lunel looked at the card again, then back at him. She leaned in slightly, not enough to close the space, just enough to weigh her words. Do you know what it's like? She said. Slowly, to work all night, serving people who can't even remember your name but then be told by the same people what your value is. He nodded faintly. Do you know what it's like? She continued, her voice lowering. Almost like a whisper, to have degrees that hang on walls in a tiny apartment you barely afford, while men in cufflinks ask if you speak well because it's so ... unexpected. I do now, he said. At least, I'm trying. She studied him. Not the suit, not the hair. Just the man stripped of posture, stripped of performance. You were wrong about me, she said. I know, he replied. And still, you offered. He gave a small nod. 'Cause people don't grow when they're comfortable. They grow when they're humbled. The card felt heavier in her hand than it should have. Not because of what it offered, but because of what it meant. Being seen, not romanticized, not reduced. Seen. You want me to join your team? She said, more to herself. I want to work with someone who scares me a good way, he said. Someone who knows when silence says more than speeches. You've got a voice that cuts through the room, even when you whisper. That's rare. For the first time that evening, her lips curled. Not a full smile, just a trace. Warning and a wonder. She stood upright again. Slid the business card into her apron. I'll think about it. Joran exhaled, relieved. Fair. Then she said something in French deliberate, low, almost like a secret. La respect commence la o el ego, se termine. He furrowed his brow. Translation? She leaned closer. Respect begins where ego ends. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him with an empty plate, an untouched glass of wine, and something blooming in his chest that felt oddly like ... hope.